It's
I did see the shirt. SpaceX.
Today's the day, or something like that.
And anyway, everybody is so excited to have Phil back. Last Thursday, we blew through an hour and we got through 30% of my agenda. Not even. We got through 3 of 12 questions. So we're going to come back to that, but with a twist this time around, because a lot has changed just in the last 48 hours. We're going to break it all down, and everybody is asking questions now since the SpaceX S1 came out. What does it mean for Tesla? What does it mean if you get an allocation? Should you buy? Should you wait? And we're going to talk about so much more. We're also going to talk about the impact of abundance, the age of abundance, some career advice too, some culture advice as well from Phil's experience. And last week, you were so well received. Don't forget, follow Phil or subscribe to him on Twitter as well, like I do, on X. Links are below. And a big thank you to the mods in the chat. Let's get into it because we got to move fast. I have a deck today. This is called How We Allocate to AI. And it's never financial advice, of course. But first of all, last time we were together, we spoke about this. You actually triggered the idea in my head about a revenue continuum of when things would hit for Tesla. So before we jump into some SpaceX talk, I did share this with the Cyberbulls last week. And when you look at things like the ramping across the country right now for cybercabs and robotaxis and the breadcrumbs that Elon's dropping, he said these things are going to be everywhere by the end of the year. And you look at what they're doing in Houston, in Arizona, in Nevada, of course, all across Texas, Florida. They're building car washes. They're building facilities. They have hundreds and hundreds of these things all ready to roll all over the place. So I think robotaxi revenue, cybercab revenue is going to hit hard in 2026. So that dollar side will go to the left. But you inspired me to put this together last week. That's because the big question is, when do things hit? So let's run through this first and get your take. Energy storage is already hitting. It makes up nearly 19% of profit for the company right now. So it is already very significant. And remember, this is 32% margin business. Tesla Semi ramping in Sparks, Nevada, very quickly as well. I've seen videos about the factory and their projections. And the orders are already off the hook. We're talking thousands of orders already in the books. So it's not going to be a huge line item until they get to like 10,000 units, because these things are 300,000 plus a pop, but it will be big. FSD is now licensed or authorized in 10 countries around the world. That's going to become very significant. Pure margin. Absolutely glorious. We talked about robotaxis, humanoid robots. I watched the sunsetting of the Model X and the S. I have a Model X from 7 years ago. Flawless car. Never gave me a problem, ever. Nothing ever went wrong with it. And I refused to give it up. But it was sad to see them sunsetting that. But also exciting to see they're turning off the 2 best cars in the world, the Fabergé Egg and the #1 car ever made, according to some car magazine, which I didn't hear of. But anyway, to make room for humanoid robots. And when they do things at scale, they are very serious. They're not going to do 50 a week for the next 5 years. They're going to ramp that puppy fast. And then everything else that's out there. So what is your take on this? What are your big bottom line attribution items that you see hitting in both 2026 and 2027? We're going in on the deep end. We're going in hot here.
Yeah, well, let's make a note about Semi. I think that's going to be a fire product. Unbelievable. I don't think they built a factory big enough for that thing.
50,000 units is a lot. I think they're constrained by batteries, because these things take up, I think the battery content of a Semi is the same as 9 Model Ys.
I mean, they're priced aggressively. The price to performance is amazing. I mean, once you get one of those in your shop, however you're arranged, is whatever size of trucking you are, I think you're going to be wanting to buy more. So I think they're going to be on tight allocation once they get, because the ramp has got to be somewhat slow too, right? So,
they've gotten so much better at ramping factories.
True, but still, I mean,
and they're quite simplistic.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time looking at the actual build, and I've walked the Cybertruck line twice, and I kind of know how they do it by dropping things in and elevate stuff and smash things together. It's the battery pack, it's the frame, and then the other stuff just slots in. I think, the capacity of that factory is 50,000. It wouldn't be surprising to me if they got 5,000 out by the end of the year or more, if they're not battery constrained.
Well, I think they can do that, but I still think that demand is going to really pinch them.
Yeah.
And so it's a high quality problem, but I think it's an amazing product.
Yeah. What happens when they drive autonomously too? And
I think, I think that's the secret in the corner type of thing, because right now the key is to attract the trucking industry as it sits. And there's plenty of reasons that they will be attracted to the product. And then autonomy will just be, icing on the cake downstream. I mean, it's going to be amazing. I mean, even supervised autonomy, if you think about it, is amazing from the driver's perspective. So, I mean, geez, look how that takes. I mean, when you drive one of these things, it takes the pressure off. You're not jamming on a clutch and shifting gears at 1 million miles an hour, and just to get, up to 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's funny. I watched, because I spent a lot of time on a very, very big, 7,200 foot pass, and I watched the truck drivers first of all crawling up the hill, and then going down. You can see them jamming their gears to try and not burn their brakes alive, and that's a very physical job.
Yeah, think about how beautiful regen on something like this is for those downhills. I mean, it's amazing. On autonomous driving, my gosh, I think we're going to see a pretty strong pickup in FSD subscriptions, just because it's awesome. I mean, really, it is awesome. It works as advertised, and then, as the beautiful thing about this is such a virtuous circle, is that when Robotaxi rolls out, people will be like, wait a minute, this car drives itself. Oh, I can have that too, in my own car. I mean, I see a ton of Tesla drivers still driving their cars, and I'm thinking, what are you doing? Like, I mean, believe me, it's not to save a buck. It's not that. They're just absolutely unaware that their car is a robot. They're absolutely unaware.
It's true.
So, but that's how I drive now. Or I should say how I move. I shouldn't say drive. It's how I move. I mean, and the most important aspect of this is, when I went into it as a investor tester kind of mentality, right? Let's see what this is like. But now I've just adopted it as how I do it. It's not like I'm not testing anything anymore. It's just, I get in the car and I go from A to B on FSD. I'm not thinking about, oh, what version, what's this, what's that. I'm just thinking about all the other things I want to do in the car. Yeah. So, in other words, what I'm saying is I've just adopted it as a natural way I do things. And I think that once you get over that small hump, and there's a hump to it, you got to have kind of like, there's an intimidation factor when a car for the first time is about to drive you. I think a lot of people, you and I probably have a different perspective because we've gone through this long run up to this, but, an individual has never seen this before. It's like, what, and I think Tesla would do itself a great bit of service if they built more onboarding type of stuff into the software stack that really kind of brings people into it in a comfortable way.
It's funny. I was one of the early adopters. I dropped 10K 7 years ago on FSD, and within the first year there was a huge rainstorm, and it detected a multi-car pileup ahead of me on the freeway going back from work when I was a wage slave back in the day. And that saved my life, or it definitely saved riding off a car. And since then, I was like, best 10K I ever spent, even though the car probably would have done it without FSD at the time. It's just remarkable. But back to the story. What else do you see hitting here fast? That was semi with the secret corner.
talk a little bit about robotaxi. I think we are in a run up to an explosion here. I don't care when it happens, honestly. I'm not too concerned about it. I believe that Tesla's putting in place the necessary to make it a service that scales. Look, I think what I want to communicate about this is that when Tesla or Elon thinks about his robotaxi business, he is thinking about a business that is going to scale much bigger than Waymo, much, much bigger.
Oh,
and because he's thinking that way, all the operational scale components have to come to play. In other words, imagine if you said, hi, I run the Waymo service, and for every 100 cars, I need a call center agent, right? I'm not saying that's the number. I don't really know the number, but I've seen enough operational issues in the field to know that their operational team, from a customer service to pure operations, is fairly large and burdensome to the scale model. So if I said I needed, let's say, 1 per 100 cars, and I scale that up with robotaxi, Tesla robotaxi, that math doesn't work. Elon doesn't want to create a call center of 5,000 people. He wants to, he's like, hey, I want to move up to 1 million cars, and I never want more than 300 people servicing, customer complaints or issues or calls, and I want them only to be about, fare issues or something like that, right? Not actual operation. So my point is this: there's a bit of patience going on here to get the FSD stack for that vehicle in a way. I think they've checked the safety box, or frankly, I think that's pretty much behind them. I think now where they're at is they're just dealing with a bunch of operational stuff: pickups, drop-offs, loops, navigational issues, the classic stuff that actually really, really gets you in a knot if you're trying to run it as a service.
Yep.
So I think they're on the cusp now. I don't know if 26 is going to be a big year for it, but I guarantee 27 will.
Oh yeah.
Sure. It's when it starts, it's going to be something else, and it's going to come on, and we're going to be looking back. Well, that month that it starts, we'll look back and go, wait a minute, onesie twosies were out in Houston. What are you talking about? And all of a sudden there's, 5,000 cars in service across 5 cities. And we'll be like, oh my God, this is happening. And, that I think that'll happen, I don't know, late 26, early 27 for, worst case, because I think there is some sense at Tesla that they're a bit possibly waiting on this V15 stack that they're working on. But I really don't know. I think irrespective of that, I know that they're making progress on the V14 stack and continue to plug away hard at that, because remember what happens when they move over to the V15. All they're doing is just basically taking all the training data that they have, the reinforcement learning use cases, and just rerunning through the system to reparameterize a larger model. So it's not like they're not starting from square zero. They're just literally starting, so in other words, if they try to solve a problem in the field, say this month, that relates to some operational thing, like some navigational issue, and they cure that problem in 14 dot whatever it is that they're running in the field, then they've got that data set up ready to run when they do the next model. So there's not going to be some, gapping there from that perspective.
Yeah, there's always a little regression, though, I've noticed, even on my versions across vehicles.
Well, such is the nature of software, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Anything else pops out at you here from this list? Humanoid robots. I mean, I think they're going to build up to 10,000 of them by the end of this year, and they'll be working. I think I know for a fact they've got a whole bunch of surprises up their sleeves, and it was very comforting for me to see the Figure robot work for 6 days straight.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even have actuators in the forearm. It's all in the hand. I know it's probably lifting very small packages, but it was impressive nonetheless.
Look, I think we talked about this maybe last week. But here's the thing. I mean, it's clear that Tesla has taken a different communication strategy, a different approach to communicating what Optimus is about to the public at large. No more, lab videos, at least for now. And I think that's all good news. If you're an investor, I think that's good news. You might want information. No, you don't. You let them cook, let them do their job. I guarantee they're working on it. What I think is you can see them putting the pieces in place just from the build out. Like, yes, why did they close down SNX production? Because they really, really do want to build a proto factory, up here in Fremont. It's up the street from me. And they're probably, busy disassembling the SNX line and converting that over to what will be the first gen of a build strategy, a manufacturing model for Optimus. And then of course, we've got this facility coming up in Austin where they've got, annualized production of about 10 million units. I mean, hey, they're serious about this. The fact that they haven't communicated to it makes everybody a little nervous. I'm not nervous. I don't really want them to communicate. That's my point of view.
Yep. And I know of two people that have seen Optimus 3, and I told you this before as well. One person said it was very creepy. The other person said it was sublime. But if you leak any detail about it, you will be like literally whacked out of the company instantaneously. Yeah. So it's total sworn secrecy. Okay, let's move on. I do want to switch gears because a lot of stuff happened with this S1, and I was kind of honestly sitting on the fence with the IPO. I know that 80% of IPOs fall after they launch, but then I started digging into the S1, and it effectively de-risked the entire vision for this SpaceX stuff. Core revenue is much stronger than expected, hitting nearly 19 billion. Massive game changer was the Anthropic AI compute deal, 15 billion a year. And they're talking to other customers as well. That could be a $50 billion a year revenue. And it is high margin revenue too, with all their coherent compute. So it proves they can monetize their heavy GPU CapEx, Amazon Web Services, I now call it EWS, Elon Web Services, is now very real. And that's a huge part. And then we have SpaceX, and then we have asteroid mining and so much other stuff. I'm not even talking about Terfab, but it changed everything. And then Cursor, jumping them up. Let me go to slide 6 first. This was a big surprise on my bingo card. The Cursor capability just dropped. Cursor 2.5 is way better than most people think. 63.2% benchmark score at 55 cents per task. Is way cheaper than Google, way cheaper than Opus 4.7, way cheaper than GPT 5.5, and pretty much just as good. This is, again, and they've only been doing this for 3 or 4 weeks now. So
yeah, I'm using it and it's great.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Well,
wow.
I'm using it heavy and it's great.
So you've used Claude as well before, and all of them, I assume? No. Okay.
So I'm not here to give you a comparison, but definitely big into Cursor right now, and built a pretty significant app with it in the last week. So, just to educate myself, and I probably will eventually go over to Claude just to give me a good compare.
Yeah. So can you explain for the audience, because this is where people get tripped up. They don't understand the delta on price here. So if you're in, let me try read these, zoom in, Opus 4.7 Max, $11 a task. And GPT 5.5 extra high, $4.37 a task. And then Composer 2.5, 55 cents a task. That is step changes cheaper. Now, there's so many companies out there saying, well, if you earn $200,000 as a developer, I want you to spend $200,000 or $1 million on tokens.
Right.
What are you going to use when you know you're token constrained? Can you explain to the audience why people will go to the better, cheaper, faster solution way faster than the more expensive one?
I think, speed of development matters in a big way. You want, you're in the tools so much in a turnaround. Here's, I guess, maybe a good way of saying this is we have changed the way we're doing development now. When I started this, it was so a cycle, a turnaround cycle was so expensive in terms of the amount of compile to build to test, that you as a developer learned to do a lot of work before you went and looked. Okay, you did a lot of work. You know, it's like building something, whatever it is. Obviously,
you mean
in those
coding before you compile to see if it works, type of thing.
Yeah. You can't afford the compile cycle. I mean, I remember in the early days when I was doing Mac development, like compiles would be 4 to 10 minutes or something for the project, one of the projects I was working on. So I spent, potentially hours before I did a run, gearing up to do that run and to do that because I needed my mind. So now it's totally changed. Now it's a bit more just like you would use, an AI chat tool. It's very interactive, and you're looking for. So from your perspective, you may not understand whether the difference between quality between one model or another, but you will understand speed, because speed will give you that iterative turnaround time. We've got a whole set of developers today that they're not mature developers. They're really just, they're English coders, right? And so they are in a different place, and they're just like, hey, change the way that UI looks. Oh, do it this way. Oh, do it that way. Let me see what it looks. They're looking for fast turnaround time. And I think that's what I've seen lately with Cursor, is just really quick. I mean, it's a good thinker. It works out a lot of problems. I'm surprised some of the stuff that it actually thinks about and how it sends it back to me. Like when it explains itself, I'm like, oh my God, I asked you to do something and you thought about these other things that I would have about to tell you about. And remember, I think from my point of view, being someone that is at 40 plus years of experience developing code, I understand the architectural issues with these things. So I'm saying, I want you to add this thing, and I'm about to, in my mind, I'm about to ask it to gut it and change it and do it a different way because I know about the efficiencies and so forth. But in some ways it gets ahead of me, and I'm a little bit shocked by that. Now,
and that by the way, this is for the audience, that's called the smart workflow layer or something, isn't it? That is the edge that Cursor has over others.
I actually don't know what the characterization of that is, to be honest with you. But anyway, I'm just impressed using a tool like this, and it's shocking what you can do now with a tool like this versus needing. I mean, you need systems level thinking to build great apps. You need to be able to zoom out. The weird thing about it is, in a sense, these tools obviate the need for entry-level computer science people, but they don't obviate the need for advanced computer science people. So it's this weird kind of it's turned upside down. You don't bring people in and train them for years to get up to say what my level of thinking is. You need people with my level of thinking. Well, how do you get them if you don't get them through that door? So I don't know. But it's a game changer.
Yeah, sure. Super interesting. Let's get back to our story. Move fast. So I put together a sum of the parts last night and this morning, and this excludes Terfab, which basically, if they pull Terfab off, it's going to be worth more than NVIDIA, which means more than $5.5 trillion. That's crazy. But if you just look at some of these basic ones and adding very conservative valuations to them. So here, I think I've got a list of the items that I just looked. The Space Launch Core, 250 billion value. So they are going to be asked by Google, by NASA, etc., to throw things into space. I assigned 250 billion value. Global Communications Network, Global Internet, $500 billion. It's worth more than that, but just $500 billion. Conservative valuation based on their revenue today and their growth trajectory. The Frontier Lab, XAI with Cursor, like we just discussed, I gave it 400 billion. Considering Anthropic is 1.2 trillion, I gave it a third of Anthropic value, but I know it's going to smoke Anthropic over time because they'll have more compute. Perhaps. Could be wrong. We'll see. Space-based data centers, that's going to take a long time to get them all up there. So that's 3+ years out, but I assign a $200 billion value today. Elon Web Services. So if you take just the Anthropic revenue of 15 billion, give it a 40x multiple because they're growing so fast, they've got a lot more customers. Yeah. That's a reasonable multiple. That's worth 600 billion. I can easily, before I even talk about Terfab or all the other good stuff they got going on, $2 trillion valuation, sum of the parts. And this is how it looks. So keep me honest here. Am I smoking crack, or does this make sense to you? That SpaceX at $2 trillion is actually cheap.
I think SpaceX at $2 trillion is incredibly cheap. Let me explain it in my terms. I wrote this sort of master plan article about the business of SpaceX. It's pinned to my X account called TerraSpace. Okay.
I've read it 2 or 3 times, by the way. I hope that's okay.
Thank you. But last night I wrote a post that I think really nails it. And what I'm trying to say is this: ignore all the other businesses that SpaceX is theoretically in. Don't worry about the NASA launch business. That's noise, at least for now. Think of it as nothing more than a company that controls the spice, and the spice is compute, okay? And so to think about it in those terms, we have to think about what's going on. What is the vertical integration of the spice? Well, spice is the Dune reference, by the way.
First, and I know nothing about movies, so that's completely lost on me.
Yeah, so
I do remember the spice and tea shipping networks from back in the day.
Easily probably transferable, but you know, the spice is the most valuable substance in the universe in the Dune series. And the person who controls the spice controls the universe. Okay. So that's the concept here. And so the spice in this analogy is compute. And so to understand this, we have to look at the vertical integration of that stack. We have to look at Terfab as the producer of the compute chips themselves, right? When it comes online and it runs at producing a terawatt of compute a year, far outpaces everyone else in the industry in terms of building that component of the spice. Secondly, SpaceX controls the railroad to space. It is the way you move compute to space. Starship is that entity. There is nothing coming online that even comes remotely close.
Yeah, speaking of remotely, you want to spend 2 seconds talking about all the moats that they have? Forget the thrusters, the boosters, the landing capability, the size, the materials. I mean, nobody is in this stratosphere of where they are today.
Yeah. To finish the story, the vertical integration of this compute stack is production of chips, moving chips to space, and then operating chips in space in an orbital data center that is essentially an energy-free environment. And why does this matter? Why does this matter? If you look at what just happened with Anthropic and what you label as Elon Web Services, that is nothing more than the prototype for the business of SpaceX. And what it means is where Anthropic will eventually be in 5 years is they'll be doing the same deal with SpaceX, except that compute will be delivered in space. And the reason that this is true, like impossible to be anything other than true, is that the amount of compute we will need will far exceed our ability to supply power to it. And when I say compute, I'm talking about everybody's compute of AI. So if you look at AI and you look at the demand curve, we are doing about 20 to 30 gigawatts of AI compute today on planet Earth. That includes everything that you know of in the AI box, everything, okay? That in 5 years grows right into that terawatt range because it's growing at 3.4x a year. That's what historically in the last 2 or 3 years, that's the growth rate. You can easily project that forward. You can't possibly convince me that that rate would slow down or not increase from there, right? It's probably a low number. So if you look at that number, you realize what's really about to happen here. We are about to hit a fat brick wall on our ability to actually deliver AI to the world. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter who it is. So what happens to SpaceX here? SpaceX becomes the player that gives compute to everyone, not just Anthropic, but Google will be begging them. Frankly, OpenAI will be begging them. They better get on friendly terms because everybody that's got anything in the frontier space of AI or anything slightly downstream from that will require much bigger compute fabric, and they will not be able to do it on Earth. So this is what the business of SpaceX is. And so if you think about that, if you believe in AI, if you sit back and you go, AI is the biggest thing I've ever seen, then you have to realize that AI gets delivered through SpaceX in the next couple of years. There is no other option. There is no other option for AI to get delivery.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, a good question here from G12. How come nobody ever mentions the solar flare threat in space? There's no atmosphere to protect it. Well, SpaceX has nearly soon to be 11,000 satellites in space. And yeah, space is a very rough environment, but these things are designed to be solar flare proof. Now, there was apparently a thing 150 years ago, the Carrington event or something that would have wiped out a lot of stuff. But that's 1 in 150, maybe 1 in 500 year event. So is that a threat?
No.
Solar flare?
Look, I mean, whatever the threats are and whatever the operational, environmentally operational difficulties in space, there is no company on Earth other than SpaceX that knows how to operate it at scale.
Exactly.
And you just said that because with 10,000 plus satellites that operate the Starlink network today, they understand radiative cooling, they understand radiation complexity, they understand, orbit maintenance, decommissioning satellites. They have the stuff wired like nobody's business. They even understand the production side. Like if you think about it, what is one thing that Elon is amazing at? Manufacturing anything right at scale.
At scale, yeah.
And the reality is, one of the things that he manufactures at scale that people like, they think of Starlink as it's a service, it sits there, but you have to think about how it got there. They're building. They are the only company on the planet that builds satellites at scale. So if we go from 10,000 today for Starlink, and we say, let's zoom that up to, Starlink's eventual 50,000 kind of network complete rollout, that pales in comparison to the orbital data center satellite constellation that has to go into space. That easily will be 1 million satellites, and that is not full deployment. That is the beginning of deployment. So now you're talking about mass production from 10,000 total satellites to scaling that up to where you're needing to produce maybe 10,000 a month based on some launch cadence that probably is 2 to 3 Starship launches a day to move those types of satellites into space to be part of this entire compute fabric.
Interesting. So let's stress test this, because people are faced with the predicament, the dilemma right now. Okay, I get an allocation on Schwab, Fidelity, Robinhood, whatever the fourth one is, E-Trade, to buy some SpaceX shares. And imagine it goes out at $100 or $500 or whatever at a $1.75 trillion valuation. You just said it's easily worth $2 trillion, but people can't wrap their heads around that. How can a company just come out of the box and already be worth $2 trillion with just some global communication network? And don't realize all these. But if you look at the core piece I have here, data centers, you basically wrote off the launch capability, the yellow, the $250 billion I have here for NASA. You said that's nothing. You do believe in the XAI, which is the Anthropic competitor, at 1/3 of the valuation when they're already almost on par, and they will be buying Cursor for $60 billion by the end of the year. Starlink, easily $500 billion. The green part is data centers in space, EWS.
Yeah,
that's huge. Yeah. If you were in the back of a napkin, we're sitting down having beers at a bar, how would you map this out? Where was the real value, the top 3 value components of the sum of the parts?
Well, again, I think launch for anybody other than their own private husband use for compute is noise in the system. So I mean, it may be a big business, but it's not the big business. The big business is that compute business I've been talking about. So I mean, that kind of like combines your EWS and data center. To me, it's all pretty much the same box of revenue. In terms of XAI itself, maybe we can narrow that down to, SpaceX producing its own forward frontier models or use models. Like, so for example, if it, what's really good is there's certain good optionality here in the sense that if they end up operating inference for Google or Anthropic or frankly OpenAI or anybody else is in that business, and they don't quite make it there with their own frontier, but if they do make it there with their own frontier, whether it's the coding side with Cursor or it's just the rest of their AI production, then they'll sort of keep that resource to themselves and grow the pie with greater margin, I think.
And this is so crazy because we just learned last week, the guy from Google said we're out of capacity. We can't even run two models at the same time. Google, who've been building TPUs for 10 years, they're tapped out right now. Now, what's interesting, I love a thing called optionality when you've got choices of direction. These guys can run frontier model, or they can service the other frontier models with compute, or do both. I mean, there's no other frontier model other than Google that has this ability. And then Google is even knocking on the SpaceX door to lock up capacity to send their stuff to space too.
My guess is in the next couple months, we will see a deal with Google to SpaceX that will make our head spin. I think that deal will be structured in a sort of long-term compute in space model where Google invests billions of dollars, could even, just absolute huge deal to like lock in. I think it's going to find itself in competition with Anthropic, and it's going to make the Anthropic deal look kind of tiny. Look, Google already owns about 7% of SpaceX. So any deal they do with SpaceX outside of necessity only still feeds their own pocket. I mean, this is an amazing reason. I guarantee Google will do an amazing deal with SpaceX. I don't know.
Does it strike you as funny? You see that this whole AI singularity world is creating the weirdest bedfellows. Like the co-opetition is bizarre.
Yeah, it really is. If you think about it, it's sort of like, we have Elon and Jensen flying on Air Force One talking and best of friends, but yet Jensen kindly, continues to pick his pocket in terms of, well, I'm going to build my own autonomy stack. I'm going to build my own, my own robotics platform. I mean, obviously he wants to, I suspect that we'll see NVIDIA want to get a piece of SpaceX as well. I don't know if Elon's going to say yes to that, but everybody's going to want to get in on it because, look, they see this as, like I said, it is clear to me. I don't know what drops the day after the IPO. I don't know what it looks like 6 months, but I do know what it looks like in 10 years. And in 10 years, this is a company that will multiply its market cap by 10x easily because it controls the spice. It controls the spice, and you can't get around them. There is no path to space. There is no path to space. And just when you think that's it, then Elon turns around and says, well, I'm building Terfab too. So in other words, I'll control that part of the vertical integration. I will build chips at scale and no one else will be there. So
so you got the rails to space at scale, you got the chips at scale,
you got the cargo, you got the rails. I mean, it's like you got all the parts. So it's
who else is thinking like this? Who else on earth is thinking like this? The answer is nobody. Not even close.
Well, I think people are thinking, but no one is doing. I mean, the key here is execution. Elon has got this in front of him, has seen this. Look, I hate to go, in that box called, what happens in Light Club stays in Light Club. But I will tell you that when I wrote that post last night about the spice, one of my first likes was by Elon Musk. Because it is clear to me, and he's not going to get public on any of that stuff, and he's not going to repost it or talk about it because it's in this quiet period. but he's allowed to say, he's allowed to give a bit of a thumbs up. But it's clear to me that he gets what I wrote. Actually, he's the, I'm not ahead of him. It's clear to me he understands this vertical integration of space and why he's putting the pieces together the way he is. And it's absolutely extraordinary. Like, I sit back and I look at this and I go, and by the way, it's going to drag Tesla upstairs too.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's going to drag Tesla straight upstairs because, Tesla requires great inference compute across one of the AIs that's coming online that we aren't even, we're sitting here, we talk about it like, okay, we see AI over here. What's AI over here? It looks like agentic. Well, it looks like, AI assistants that we're used to. We're coding agents, general agentic AI that's about to hit enterprise business in a fairly big way. Generative AI that's about to, reshape movie industries and gaming industries and all the things like that. But we forget, I don't know if we forget, we just talked about it, but I think it's just not right front and center. We forget about embodied AI. Embodied AI in terms of Optimus, in terms of FSD, robotics, basically. The AI that's going to power the brains of our robots is going to be absolutely massive. And this Terfab lock-in between these two companies,
huge.
Yeah,
and that's why I said this SOTP doesn't even include Terfab, because that's $5 trillion on top. That's just a massive, big, huge of gravy or cherry on the top, whatever you want to call it.
It matters that they build the chips. It matters. It's material because, I think Elon knows that NVIDIA is about to slam its head into a brick wall with the ability to build enough chips to meet its supply. It's fine for Jensen to get on a plane and tout, I like to sell these chips to China. I got news for him. He doesn't need to sell these chips to China. The demand he's going to have for AI, just domestically, so to speak, in the United States sector of AI is big enough to outstrip his ability to get supply on those chips in about 2 years. And the only entity that will come online that will meet that supply curve will be Terfab.
And what blew me away is the $15 billion deal out through 2029 with Anthropic. That buys a lot of chips too. Now that EWS is a huge standalone business. So getting back to this before we move on to the next topic, I'm going to press you one more time. What are the top 3 components of the sum of the parts SpaceX valuation in your mind? In my mind, it's Starlink is big, XAI is big, and of course the Elon Web Services is big. And this does not even take into account Terfab or anything else.
Yeah. So obviously I've been talking a lot about compute. I do want to say a couple words about Starlink. If I put it this way, I'd say compute and AI. I'm glad you put more buckets in it, but I'd say compute and AI is their big business here, right? It sounds like, wait a minute, what? It's a rocket company. No, compute and AI is its business. But in terms of Starlink is going to be a surprise leader as well. It's bucket number 2 in the big revenue bucket because Starlink is about to meet its stride. Like, it not only is it growing the subs fast, but it's becoming obvious that it's going to chip away at the terrestrial cellular carriers in a massive fundamental transformative way. Seriously. Look at what happened. What was it last week with the Verizon CEO? The words he spoke tells me he has fear in his eyes. He's kind of freaking out because he realizes that, he's like, that Starlink is a business for the rural. We service with great density in these environments, of cities, and where the subscription density is high, and we have it locked up. And I'm like, no, you don't. You're just there. And what you told me was, oh, Starlink is participating over here in that 5% space. I think its TAM is about to surprise.
Yeah. And actually, let's take a step back, because you were at Apple for a long time. Apple at one stage had a satellite play, if I'm not mistaken, and they had a vision of going direct to consumer using a satellite network for cellular communications. What happened there?
That's a piece of history that escapes me, honestly.
Yeah.
I unfortunately don't know what you're referring to. I mean, you mean in recent times with its
No, about 10 years ago, they invested
Oh.
in a satellite company so they could actually provide cellular communications through satellites to their iPhone customers. So bypassing the AT&Ts and the T-Mobiles, etc.
I think we'll just have to skip the topic. I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's huge. But what you're saying is they're all quaking in their boots because they know
they know
from
what's
one day to
coming.
the next they can turn it off. They have the bandwidth.
They're living in the bubble of you know, Elon delay time. You know, in other words, it'll take a while to get there. But there's no doubt. I mean, do you see SpaceX buying spectrum for its health? I mean, there's a reason they're doing. There's a reason EchoStar has SpaceX stock right now.
Yeah.
You know, it's the mobile side of the business beyond the so-called replacement for just, you know, terrestrial internet access.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a huge business, and I think SpaceX will tip its toe and eventually be. What's really cool about it is it, you know, it by its very definition is immediately a worldwide carrier with really effectively no lack of coverage. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have, you know, if you look at cell towers today, they're built along highways. We think that that's everywhere. You know, look at these coverage maps of Verizon in the United States. You know what? You go out in the middle of Tuolumne Meadows or something in the middle of Yosemite, you'll find out what cellular coverage looks like in about 2 seconds flat.
At the end of my driveway, there is no cellular coverage. Put it that way. It's like I said, you're not surprised me there.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Okay, let's switch gears to, guess what? Chips and how big this actually is. Let me get this right. I think it's slide 7. So AI5 chips and the Optimus RAM strategy. AI4 we know is good enough for the Cybercab. The question is, with them ramping Optimus right now, it works on AI4, but really needs AI5. And AI5 is coming, but when does the convergence of scale versus chips happen? When do we see that true scale? Like, how many are they actually going to make if they're only running on AI4 versus waiting for the AI5?
Yeah, AI4 based Optimus are simply prototypes. Yeah. In my opinion, they'll never be an AI4 Optimus that is in customer hands outside of demo or, you know, test or something like that. All units that are built with those AI4 I mean, this is what I think one of the big headaches or issues or timeline and expanders is that they're waiting on AI5. You know, if you thought, so we know that, I mean, Optimus is a beast in terms of what it needs from a compute perspective, and it absolutely needs AI5, and AI5 won't come online in any volume capacity until very, very late in the year. And then, of course, you know, probably be at volume first quarter of 27 for sure. I don't think there's any issue with that. It's, you know, it's been taped out. It's in pre-production, production. So I don't think there's any issue or risk with it. I think it's just pure fab timeline dynamics. So I think Optimus needs it. And I think, you know, whatever you see, I mean, you can build a physical Optimus in every possible fashion without the proper compute in it, you know, and really get that lined up and going. And then, you know, when you start building them at scale for customers, you'll be moving into the AI5 domain.
Yeah. And then the other thing that is kind of interesting is, and people get bogged down by this, they always talk about, oh, China has lots of robots, 200 companies making humanoids, and there's no way Tesla can compete. But they forget these Chinese robots will not be allowed on Western soil.
They're not coming here.
Maybe you're exactly. No. The other thing is,
they're basically, they're like spies, right?
Exactly. Walking spies.
They're not, you will not see a Chinese humanoid in any of the 50 states, period.
You know, and then I had to deal with FUD attacks for like a decade. Oh, the Chinese EVs are better and they're going to dominate. Model Y is still the best selling EV in China, and it's 4 or 5 times the price of the average EV. So the key thing for me is the edge that Tesla has, and what they've been thinking about since they started this whole project, is the undeniable moat of having the brain, their AI, and again the synergy with SpaceX, XAI, Colossus, all their GPUs, etc. Creates a huge data flywheel. They said that have 30,000 bots and an academy to train against each other. The manufacturing scale, nobody can touch. Their automation, that product, the machine, the builds the machine is the product. Yeah. And then the hands, they understand the dexterity, the ability to thread a needle, play table tennis, maybe do surgery. These are the
Yeah, no, totally agree with you, what you said. Yeah, I mean, first thing, let's just take China off the table. The bots aren't coming here.
Yep.
Let's pretend that there's no market for Optimus in China. Who cares? Like, let's, the number of Optimus that will be consumed by US businesses will make it a big business for sure. I mean, you'll start in low-level manufacturability, you'll move up into the service industry, you'll move into the home. I don't know if it exactly goes in that order, but that's sort of the pyramid, if you will. Eventually the home model is the one where, and I don't mean specifically a version of the product, I mean the model in general requires the most sophistication for Optimus. So if you go in, then you go into the service industry where you're interacting with, it's like, think of it as Starbucks barista Optimus, right? If you bring them down into pure manufacturing and stocking, stocking bots and the people that are filling the shelves at Walmart or Home Depot, these are absolutely labor savers, meaning that from the dynamics of that, in terms of economic dynamics of that, is like save companies fortunes. And if Walmart does it, Home Depot has to do it, like, it doesn't have a choice, because you're going to reduce the labor so much. And it's the right place to start, because these things don't interact. They just have, they, worst cases, they drop something, right? So that's part of the dynamic. So, but the thing is that obviously what Elon's doing is he's saying, I'm not trying to build the stocking robot or the pick and place robot or this robot. I'm trying to build a fully featured, fully functional, fully capable, dexterity-wise bot that really can get to the home market. And to do that, the efforts require that you can see what's going on here. There's a lot going on to make that occur just from the physicality. But because the market is going to demand so many, so many of these things, the big reality is, if you don't think about the advantage that Tesla has from a manufacturing point of view, you're missing the entire picture. It's almost like you're missing the entire picture, because Figure may end up with a fairly decent product, but they're not going to be able to manufacture that at scale. I would almost say that with some certainty, like you kind of put 80% certainty that it'll take them years to catch up with Tesla's ability to manufacture these things at scale. So I think what you'll see is, when Tesla has the right product at the right time, and by the way, we know they're working on the manufacturability of that product. I mean, it's just like what they did with Cybercab. If you don't understand what's going on here, look at the blueprint with Cybercab. Cybercab, with the unboxed process, basically said what you just said, which is they're basically, the product is the product and the manufacturing of the product. That is the product, definitionally. So look what happens with Cybercab. They are building a process that scales, taking human out of the loop in manufacturing, the unboxed manufacturing process. They're about to duplicate that process onto Optimus, in due time, and build these things at a scale like we've never seen before.
Yep, exactly. I agree with you on all of that. All right, we have, let me see where we are on our agenda. This one, we've covered that. Forget that. We covered that too. Everybody wants to know how to position themselves for what's coming. It's very clear AI is going to be huge. The demand for intelligence is infinite. As you just said regarding robots, this doesn't matter about competition, because if you have the best one, they'll sell. Even if you've got a crappy one, they'll sell too. So the demand for those will be very significant too. But what does your portfolio allocation look like for the next decade? And if you could only own, say, 3 to 5 assets, what would they be? I'm very big on very high concentration and very few winning assets. But how can people kind of protect themselves or secure their future for this technological wave, which I know you know very intimately? Do you have a high-ranked conviction list? Without knowing your portfolio, how would you play the game?
Well, look, I'm very tech heavy, so put a little asterisk on that. There are plenty of other asset classes that people can go to, and I'm not here to give financial advice in this regard at all. I'm simply saying that my portfolio is very tech heavy because I see the future. The way I think about it is the future industrialization of everything relates to AI at this point. So even if I thought about myself in the railroad business, I think of myself as being a SpaceX investor, if you get my point. So I think of it's like industrialization of the next couple decades, or at least a decade plus, is AI heavy. Compute. So you've got chip production, you've got everything around chip production, memory chips, that type of stuff. You've got anything that relates to robotics in there. But I mean, I would say that, before, say, about 2023, I decided that the biggest holding I wanted was Tesla. And I started buying Tesla at every on sale day. Literally, I didn't care, just dollar cost average into it, and eventually made it bigger than my Apple holding. And the reason I have a large Apple holding is I was an employee at Apple for 10 years. So I come with that, in other words, I don't know if I wouldn't start buying Apple tomorrow unless I heard good things. But in a sense, I'm funding my Tesla buy with Apple. I think that SpaceX.
But by the way, that's what I call a rotation.
It is a rotation. I'm just rotating sort of systematically and slowly out of Apple. I mean, Apple provides me, some fat dividend revenue that I like. And generally, what I like about Apple is simply that it's sort of it sounds going to sound weird. You ready? It's the anti-AI company, meaning it's like, in a sense, it's sort of my.
It's like a utility.
Yeah, it's my conservative play in my tech stack here. But look, I think the way I think about this is, as just your classic retail investor, I don't have any near-term view or expectations. I don't trade stocks. I'm really bad at it. I don't do options. I'm probably really bad at it. All I do is buy and hold stuff that, makes me money over time. And I have a pretty long-term horizon, and I don't get too antsy about timeline problems. I don't care that Tesla isn't banging on the door of robotaxi this quarter, because I know what happens in 2 quarters. And I don't know when I'm supposed to get into the stock other than on sale days. Like, I don't know when that discount's going to happen for me or anybody for that matter. So I believe, I love Tesla as a massive play. I love SpaceX as a massive play. I believe in on a 10-year horizon, those 2 companies, if they haven't combined, will be competing between each other for the largest market cap companies in the world.
They're synergistic out of the gate, whether they're standalone or I do believe they will combine by 2027, 2028. That's my timeline. I think the people that say it's going to combine before year end, it's complete nonsense. And they're some of our friends that we know very well.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know, and I don't really care. I can see. Look, I look at it this way. If Elon feels they should combine, then I'm going to figure out, for the most part, that I want to get behind Elon, because he's going to understand what his operational issues and efficiencies or lack thereof, as if they're separate companies, he's going to have something to think about there. And so if he speaks about wanting to combine them, it's probably a good thing. I want the mind of Elon to focus on engineering, the building side of things.
Yeah, and not deal with multiple boards, multiple companies.
Yeah. So from that perspective, I'm in on his recommendation, obviously fair value and all that kind of stuff. But I think the way I look at it is I feel that want to be heavily positioned in this AI space. I want to be part of the company that controls the spice. So I will be in SpaceX. I don't know when. I'm very confused about how to play that. Part of me wants a little piece on the first day because I don't know if that will never, I'll be.
That's the danger. It could be like 80% of IPOs that fall after the IPO,
right?
But it could also race to $3 trillion. You got Ron Barron, who's got kind of a limit order for $1 billion out of the gate, and he already has a huge bag of SpaceX. And you've got BlackRock looking at $2 billion allocation and others. So it's going to be interesting. I do suggest everybody try to get at least a couple of shares because there's a thing I call pain of missing out. And even if you just have one share, you feel like you're on the train.
Look, here's a mini story about me and IPOs, and just being a retail guy and not having any inside edge. I mean, my biggest inside edge was my Rivian IPO. Everybody should know why that's the case. I worked there, but that's a story that doesn't need to be told because the story that should be told is my Meta or Facebook IPO. And I got into that on the first day. And I think it came out at 17 and I bought it at 40. And then it went down for, I think, maybe 2 years. I don't know, something like that. Yeah. I put it away. I tucked it away. I haven't looked at it in a long time. And what's it trading at now? A lot. So, by the way, I don't like that company very much. But irrespective of that comment, my point is I bought the IPO at some $40. Fell off. It came back to its, opening price, and I was pissed about it. But I sat there with patience, and basically, the patience is I didn't look at it every day. I don't think of it that way. I just looked at it on what's the 10-year horizon, and for me, that was a big deal. Social networking then was a big deal, and now I look at it the same thing with SpaceX. I probably want to get a piece of it on day one, just because, as you said, I don't want to potentially miss out as I see it kind of go up. It'll make me probably, and then maybe it falls, and then I feel like, okay, I can get in. I think there'll be entry points. There's always entry points for stocks, honestly. Yeah. There's going to be a few rockets that blow up. The market's going to freak. Look, the thing about SpaceX that people are not ready for a space-based business investing, honestly. I think what's going to happen is somewhere, maybe this afternoon, but somewhere in time, there's going to be a Starship that blows up on the pad and takes out a building, and the stock's going to drop 30% overnight. That's your chance to buy.
Exactly. You think like me as well. I am a classic.
I'm not wishing the bad news, but I'm just telling you.
I'm a bottom fisher that runs into burning buildings. That's where I've made a lot over the years. So I love that. Let's get two very quick last stories. Let's try hammer out here. And this is top questions that my community has had for you too, is what advice would you give people to help them thrive in the age of AGI? We know that infinite demand for intelligence. We know that the abundance economy is coming, but that may take 5 or 7 years to get here. Yeah. We know as well, it kind of makes me a little bit mad when you get people like David Sachs, much respect to him, but he says, oh no, AI is going to create lots of jobs. And then we just literally every single day, you got LinkedIn, Meta whacking 25% of their staff. I think 20% out of LinkedIn yesterday, PayPal, all the Krakens, the Coinbases, you name it. And they're all saying the same thing. It's like, okay, we can do a lot more with less with AI.
Yeah.
And, they give this stupid dog and pony story that everything is fine. But the truth is, it's not fine. Not at all. So what advice would you give people, especially the younger people, not us old farts, but we're kind of at the end of our or I don't want to say rope or life, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But for the younger people, if they have, say, a computer science degree, where do they go to next? How do they prepare? How do they build specific skills, a mindset? How do they make themselves future-proof themselves as they go forward? Because I know you've been around, you've seen everything, you've done everything. What would you tell them?
Well, let me give a lead-in comment to this. Yes, there's definitely going to be contraction, especially in white collar space, because of the intellectual capability of this stuff. And the fact is that most companies take that do more with less mentality because they, as Jensen said, lack imagination to do more with more. Okay. So putting that aside, some companies like, oh, I have more, I can do more. But a lot of companies don't think that way. They're just sort of like, okay, let's look for operational efficiency through this. And that's the first place that strikes them as the hot place to deploy. I think that what's interesting about how it would give, people that are entering the workforce or still in school advice is exactly the advice I give both of my daughters. One is will be entering her junior year in engineering, and one is a happy employed engineer in architecture. And I say, what you need to do at a bare minimum is be part of the AI revolution. You should not reject it. You should be the person in your office, the person in your class that knows how to use the tools the best. These are tools. They may be tools in some ways that, you probably need less carpenters because you have nail guns, right? But the reality is that if you treat them that way as tools, then you can rise above and be the human that commands the tool.
Great stuff. So full on lean in hard.
Lean in hard, super hard. Don't back off. Be part of it. Embrace AI. Make it part of how you get up and do your business. Secondly, become a systems thinker. Be someone that starts to think about problems in the bigger kind of framework of the problem that you're trying to solve. Most college graduates, they go through this set of doors where they're commanded, like in computer science, do this small task over in this corner, and then expand that into bigger and bigger things. But you need to jump up higher in the stack earlier in your career.
Break down systems thinker for me as a non-developer.
I think what it means is that, like, if you look at someone like me who's been in tech for forget the number of years, when I started, it was about small tasking. Small tasking in terms of like my engineering manager when I was first at Apple would say, "Do this thing, do that thing, do this thing," and come back.
And it was like a point thing instead of a big picture thing.
Exactly. It's sort of like, you're in the kitchen. Saute this chicken, roast this garlic, do this thing. But you need to understand, you need to start to change your mindset. You need to think about, no, I'm not in the kitchen to be the guy that does the broccoli with garlic. My job is to think about the menu, the big picture. I'm running the kitchen. You have to start with a mentality that starts to think about you're at the top. You need to look at your engineering managers and the people that are older than you and not just be task driven, but to say, how do they think? Because they're the most valuable people in the business now, because they are able to take a human perspective and wrap it around and then demand that their developers do tasks. Now, these tasks get richer with these AIs, but I'm just simply saying that you need to jump up faster in your career to a higher level where you start thinking about the problem in its totality and not just get stuck in the, oh, I'll learn that over time. No, immediately on day one, start thinking about what is the big problem that we're trying to solve here, and look up to managers and people in the business that have been there for years and try to figure out what makes them valuable right now in that business.
Yeah, I got to throw this curveball at you. It's a comment I pinned below. how can an Australian truck driver break into data center compute, the AI world? Right? Like this is a complete deviation from their core business. How do they cross the chasm into this new world? Any advice?
I mean, I think, that's a that's a to B kind of thing. That's pretty far off. But look, I think
maybe spend the evening studying at home, watching YouTube videos.
Again, I think the thing that I don't know what the exact resourcing is, but people should just jump into the tools and start to use them and not be. Look, here's the thing that's interesting. After using Cursor to build an iPhone app for the last 2 weeks, I realized that I'm programming in English. Okay. Now, a lot of my knowledge is very specialized and I don't realize how much I know. So I'm able to command the thing in ways that I think others wouldn't be. But I have a friend up the street. He's a lawyer. Before that, he was actually an Olympian. Totally different,
Wow.
But the thing is, I showed up at his house the other day and he said, I'm building an iPhone app. I'm training to, trying to win the nationals and masters shot putting. And I'm building an app that allows me to put in my training data. And he doesn't have a background here, but he's willing to jump in. He's very curious. And I think that the reality is anybody in any field, as long as they're curious, they should just jump in. They don't know anything. Just jump in. It's like I always told my kids, it's like you're sitting on the edge of the pool. At some point, just jump in. The water might be cold. It may be, you might sink a little bit. This may happen, but the reality is if you don't jump, you're not participating. So I don't know what a truck driver, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is a person who probably has brain, who has agency, can just jump in and realize, oh, this is hard. Now, what do I need to learn to start to learn?
And what I would say to that experience, so if you are a truck driver, you know a world from a certain lens. And I always try and look at problems and then reverse engineer them and try to solve them. So, for example, I had to plant some trees last Saturday. We had a forklift and a crane and a whole bunch of stuff to move this big 3,000-pound palm tree. It was an engineering exercise. And if I was not on the ground, that tree would never have gotten in the hole.
Yeah.
Literally, or the crane would have collapsed. One or the other. I mean, the operators, let's say, they weren't exactly brain surgeons. So
I think the thing is that if you have a domain and you know something about that domain, then think about if you're trying to screw around with AI or something, think about a tool that solves a problem in your domain.
Yes, and make that tool better. Yeah,
you can stay in that wheelhouse. Just like my friend is building this app that tracks his training because he wants to win the Masters in Masters League shot put national championship or whatever. And the reality is he's staying in his wheelhouse. He's building a tool that's useful to himself, and he's learning through that process. And he admits he's there to learn. But the reality is he's also building something useful within his domain. And I think that that's something that, if you just stay, it's not like, oh my God, you're in this box and you should jump into a completely different universe. That's crazy, right? Just incrementalize yourself into a different place and get outside your comfort zone, but also potentially build a tool or do something that relates to the stuff because that's where your feet are planted.
Exactly. There's some great suggestions there from the community. Okay, final question before we wrap, everybody. We try to keep it to an hour, but that's almost impossible. So you got so much to share, Phil. I really appreciate you. Don't forget, link below for Phil. Please follow him and subscribe. But finally, looking through your experience, one of the things I always understood when I was young, but sometimes I didn't follow through, I always felt it was very important to work for people with very high IQ, but sometimes you invariably end up working for somebody who is actually very stupid, which can be very painful. But from your experience at Apple and Rivian, etc., what do if these companies fundamentally get right about culture, leadership, and talent, that the rest of the industries or other industries completely miss. Because one of the things that I've always looked at when I invest in a company, I look at the leader and I profile them. I say, are they, first of all, a sociopath? And many of them are who run these companies, but some actually have a genuinely good heart and they want to do right by the planet, by the world, by their customers, by their employees, etc.
Yeah.
And we're seeing so many. You mentioned you're not a fan of Meta, either am I. I'm not a fan of Bill Gates. So certain people that just rub me the wrong way. But what have you noticed about helping people if they do have the opportunity to go work at a certain company? How do you profile leaders, culture, etc.?
Yeah, let's just see if I can pack this in, because this is a topic that I could go on for. So, look, one of the things I didn't say when I was playing around with what am I investing in and why do I do is I love to invest in founder-led companies where the founders are still the CEOs and that they haven't hired a professional CEO and a professional management team and all that other garbage that gets in the way of producing great products and services. Founder-led companies, they lead, and by the way, it's sort of like, it's not a mistake. It's not like the founder brought that company, had an idea, a vision, brought that forward, and will continue to drive. Already that kind of person has the drive, the Elons. We'll put Bill Gates in that category. We'll put Mark Zuckerberg in that category. Generally speaking, Steve Jobs in the era, the boys from Google. This is important stuff, in my opinion. This is what these companies will continue to push hard and not get stuck in the professional Verizon CEO mode that we saw with the guy. Yeah, right.
Rest invest. You know the term rest invest?
He's trying to defend the status quo and not lean forward, because that's what he does. But if he was the founder of that company, he wouldn't do that. He'd be saying, no, we're building for the future. Here's our, here's what we do. Here's where we're going. And you would hear that be kind of how he leads, not, leads from his mouth and his body language and not the defense of the status quo of his business. Look, I think that there's no surprise, given what I've done and where I've been in my career, why I love Elon companies, because look, he drives it that way from there's leadership here. There's technical know-how. I love technical know-how. When I hear that a senior manager regularly holds skip level meetings as his normal course of business, talking to the people who actually do the work, and that the managers in the middle are not necessary and don't need to be in those meetings, that really gets me going. That's the kind of circumstance that I love to be involved in, because that person leading that company really truly understands what's going on, and not working through a series of managers. When you have this hierarchy, you have this natural competition, and it's just normal human nature stuff. It's not kind of, you have a good VP over here and you have a good VP over here, and they may be great guys, but they're fighting for turf. They're fighting for turf. And so if you put them in charge and you're the CEO and you just get words from their mouths and that's it, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, and you had that relationship as well with RJ Scaringe.
Yeah, great guy, absolutely fantastic guy, because he's super smart. Let's start there. He's super smart as an individual, but he has a passion for what he does and where he wants to go. He doesn't get up in the morning and think, oh, Elon over here, oh, Tesla over here, oh, this, that, and the other thing. He doesn't worry about every single day what the market thinks of him. He's got a passion for what he does. He's got a vision for what he wants to do. He's got an insatiable curiosity about all sorts of spaces, stuff that's in his wheelhouse, and then stuff that's, he has a brain to be able to take it in like Elon, but he can get outside that wheelhouse and start to I've had conversations with him about things that have nothing to do with automotive. And he could sit there and listen to it, and he has a curiosity to stay in that conversation. Yeah, and a person that has this curiosity to stay in that conversation is somebody you want to be around. Okay?
Yeah, it's funny. One thing I've always said to people, when people say, What advice do I give my kid or child or somebody go to college? I said the most important skill you can possibly have in this day and age is learn how to ask the right question, which ties exactly back to your word curiosity.
Yeah.
If you, because now in the age of infinite knowledge, if you know the right question, you have the answer. You can find it, but many people don't know how to ask that question. So curiosity, I love that word.
Curiosity is super important because businesses run at a massive velocity today, and you can't protect your incumbency by some long, just because you were there doesn't work anymore. So you need to be curious and enter new businesses and new markets and see new ways of building your products or delivering your services, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's what's important. That's what I like. For example, when I interviewed with RJ, why did I go to Rivian from Apple? I literally sat down with RJ and I thought we were going to have this geeky conversation about automotive. And frankly, when I got there, I was a tech guy. I don't know anything about cars other than I like to buy cars. We were scheduled for an hour. We talked for an hour and a half about one subject and one subject alone, something I was passionate about. Turns out he was super passionate about how to build brand. Yeah. We didn't talk about engineering realities. We didn't talk about this. We didn't talk about that. We talked about, why, because my conjecture was building a car company is a crazy idea. You better have a brand that kind of makes sense. And I think at the end of the day, no matter what you think of Rivian, one way, shape, or the other, the reality is it's very clear they have a very distinctive brand in their business. And I think that is something that came from that very first conversation. I knew it was in his core. And I'm super glad that he, as somebody, he came from his degree, PhD in mechanical engineering from MIT, by no means a dummy. But look, he was curious about brand, and he was able to speak on brand, and he was able to talk about different companies and the brand. And why was he picking me off from Apple? Because he appreciated how Apple had built its brand over the years and thought maybe I might have something to say about that. Turns out I did, but that's, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, it was an interesting that we wanted to try to round out the conversation, not just go all tech and all allocations, but net to summarize everything. Be curious. Watch SpaceX IPO carefully. If you do get an allocation before the IPO, apparently you need about 100K in a big brokerage account to at least be considered. Make sure you sign up for that. But also be prepared to run into the burning building. As Phil has ominously said, well, if the spaceship crashes and the landing pad is destroyed, that's the time to buy.
That's your right on sale day, believe me.
Exactly. Appreciate you, and I appreciate the mods in the chat. Phil, this has been awesome as usual. Sorry it took 2 shows to get through our agenda, but there will be a future agenda. I promise you that. Appreciate all your wisdom and knowledge and sharing with the community. Have a great.
Right. Well, hey,
don't forget to watch the launch today too.
I was going to say let's cross our fingers, cross our toes, and hopefully watch a great launch. And
my gambit is the IPO price will hinge on this. If the launch is a success, it's gonna IPO at $2 trillion. If there's a bad thing happens, $1.75 trillion. So there's a quarter of $1 trillion on the line here today.
Well, it may be if things don't go well, we have our first red on sale day.
Exactly. Thank you, my friend.
All right.
Good. Don't forget to follow him. Bye all.